On October 28, 2023, the Louisiana Center for the Book in the State Library of Louisiana presented the 19th edition of the Louisiana Book Festival. A Conversation with Rodney Barnes was only one of the outstanding programs featured at this event. Rodney Barnes is an award-winning writer, producer, and comic book creator whose vibrant and emphatic creative voice has established him as a Hollywood mainstay. Barnes was an executive producer and writer of HBO's Winning Time, The Rise of the Lakers Dynasty. In addition to TV, Barnes is a veteran comic book creator who recently earned an Eisner Award nomination for his critically acclaimed graphic novel, Killadelphia, which quickly became a bestseller, earning praise for its compelling and fresh take on a genre story through the lens of African American culture, and now has a television show in development at Levantine TV. In the past year, Barnes has expanded his creative endeavors to a new level, launching his own comic studio and publishing imprint, Zombie Love Studios, allowing him to explore a medium and genres, horror and sci-fi, that have long been his true passion. Interviewing Mr. Barnes is Brannon Costello, the James F. Cassidy Professor of English at Louisiana State University. He is the author of Neon Visions, the comics of Howard Chaykin, which was awarded the Comic Studies Society's inaugural Charles Hatfield Prize for Best Scholarly Book. He is the editor of the interview collections Conversations with Michael Chabon and Howard Chaykin, Conversations, and co-editor of the Other 1980s, Reframing Comics' Crucial Decade, and Comics in the U.S. South. Ladies and gentlemen, Brannon Costello and Rodney Barnes.
Thanks everybody for being here, and so we'll get right to it. Thanks for that. Thanks for that introduction.
Yes.
Rodney, I wonder if you could start just by talking to us about how you first encountered comics. Were you a comics reader as a kid? How'd you find your way into this medium?
My mother was a school teacher, and this is way back before the internet. So she would do her lesson plans at the public library in Annapolis, Maryland, and because I was a rambunctious child, there was a section that they would put kids in, like a pen, where you would have the Dr. Seuss books and Curious George and all of that. And under that, I found a box full of comic books. And that started a love affair that has gone on for 40 plus years I think I learned to read via comic books. Mm-hmm. And it was something about them that grabbed my attention more so than just the regular kid-themed things. I don't know what it was, and they've evolved over time from the kiddie sort of pow bam, books to sophisticated stuff. So they've stayed with me my whole life, and now I've become part of what I do.
Mm-hmm. As a younger comics reader, were you someone who mainly followed characters or titles, or was there a point at which you began to recognize, like, if so-and-so is drawing this, I want to read it, or if so-and-so is
From the
this?
beginning. I love Neil Adams. He sort of had a realistic look. Mm-hmm. And I could tell, even as a kid, like, someone different did this one than did that one. And that realism sort of made it feel like a movie, or it made it feel mm-hmm. important. Yeah. And it was that importance that kind of grabbed me. It was like adult.
Yeah. So would you follow Adams from, if he was drawing Batman, Green Lantern?
Green Lantern, the horror books, House of Mystery, all those covers. Even if, like, they tricked you and he would do the cover, but inside somebody else would do the other art, I would follow that part too.
Yeah, so, I know. There's so many comics in that period that have a great Neil Adams or Gil Kane or Joe Kubert cover, and then you open it and it's like, it's Nestor Redondo.
Yes.
Like, okay.
Nick Cardy was a nice knockoff,
like Nick
but
Cardy,
yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Did finding comics in the library, so that led you to somebody who was buying comics on the newsstand in the
buying comics, and I think I said this to you before, and I'm ashamed of it. As a child, I would steal comics. We had a corner store, and if I didn't have enough lunch money, or there was a debate if I was hungry, I would get comics in a way that probably I'm not proud of. But they were like 10 cents, 12 cents, which was the world at the time. Mm-hmm. That was a lot of money. But now they're $4. But yeah, I loved them. It was an obsession for a while. Yeah.
Did you go away from comics for a period and then come back as a reader?
Yes and no. I mean, there was a period where, I'm in college, or, getting married, getting divorced, any of the big points in life, there would be months where I would drop out, but never to a place where I can think of a time where comics weren't a part of my life.
Okay. Well, what about horror as a genre? Where does that start for you?
always loved the Hammer films and the Universal monsters, but I never saw anyone who looked like me in them except in a minor role. And so even as a kid, I always looked for that. I yearned for it. And my mother took me to see Blackula when I was a kid. I begged her, in fact, to take me to see Blackula. And it was an experience because this was a period of time where I went to see Disney movies up until that point, and the Sleeping Beauties and the Pinocchios and all of this. This was an experience where the people talked back to the screen. And it sort of reinforced what was happening on the screen, and it made it more interactive. And I was like, I would like to do this one day. I remember thinking that specifically, and thus where things have gone.
Yeah. Was there, I think you mentioned yesterday you were a big Stephen King fan. Was there a point that you got into horror prose fiction?
Yeah, shortly thereafter, I think, in 8, 9 years old, I was reading Bram Stoker's. I remember it was letters, and it wasn't like a book, and it took a minute for me to get into the book in that way. But Stephen King, I remember reaching up when there were spinner racks with paperback books on them, and I would open the book, and it had all these reviews that made me want to read the book. It was a great marketing hook for a kid. And getting Carrie. And that was the first one I read, and still just finished reading Fairy Tale the other day.
Yeah. Are there other horror novelists that you think of as inspirations?
Richard Matheson, Anne Rice. Richard Matheson mostly because he didn't just do novels, he did television as well. He did The Twilight Zone, and he did Kolchak the Night Stalker, which was a huge influence. And so I wanted to be, I think I patterned more of what I wanted to do after Richard Matheson, because Stephen King was too big. It was too big of an idea. And I got to meet both, so that was huge.
And those are, I mean, Matheson is one where horror is kind of being mashed up with science fiction and other types of things.
So, love stories,
a
lot of different things.
Yeah, so what was being a comics fan, a horror fan, was that an entree into kind of a wider world of sort of speculative genres for you, or were you mainly like a horror guy?
No, it was what you just said. It was more of the speculative genres because horror can take you in so many places. And even if you look at Stephen King's career, it's not all just pure It and Pet Sematary. They move around, and sometimes they're allegories that connect to different ideas and different things. And I wanted to have that type of, in the literary work, and hopefully in film at some point, I wanted to do that too. I wanted to be able to speak from a cultural place that had a lot of different ideas attached to it, but horror was sort of under it. So yeah.
What's the, I mean, for you, like horror is such a big world. What is the essential element of horror that draws
the stakes? There's always life and death. There's always, those stakes. There's always life and death, but how you get there is up to the writer. Where you could be supernatural. It could be horror in the sense of monsters with Jaws and those types of things, but there was always something important attached to it. As a kid, that's what grabbed me. There was meaning somewhere in there.
So you found your way into comics professionally. I think your first professional job was writing a Falcon series for Marvel. Can you talk to us a bit about how that came about?
Yeah, I was working on a show. I was writing and producing a show called Runaways on Hulu. And we were renegotiating my contract, and they couldn't give me more money. And I said, if someone from Marvel TV could talk to someone in Marvel Publishing, I would love to do a book. And I got a call like a couple days later with the offer for Falcon.
Okay. And were you given, was there a sort of a remit for that series? Were you meant to kind of tie into an event, or was there an angle on the Falcon Marvel was trying to
They were stripping him of, I think he was the leader of the Avengers at the time, and he was Captain America.
Right.
And they were taking the shield away from him, and it was going to go back to Steve Rogers.
Okay.
So I was going to do a version of him that spoke more to the street level guy that I knew when I was coming up. That was all I had.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, Falcon, sort of historically significant as, Marvel's first African American character after Black Panther being obviously African. What did you have like a history and association with that character? Is that something that he kind of loomed large? There's a connection between his debut and a lot of blaxploitation film that's happening at the time. Like, how do you deal with that history?
He loomed. I don't know if it was large, but because he had a bird, and it was like he needed a sidekick. He needed a bird, and he was mostly there to be the moral conscience of Captain America. So he never was really cool to me.
Yeah.
You know, but he was there, and you know, he would come in to save the day or do something that was morally and ethically sound. But you know, but I tried to do something different with him, and I'm proud of what I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know sometimes when you hear people talking about writing for Marvel or DC or some of the major publishers, there's a kind of tension between, okay, you've been given a character, you have an opportunity to tell a story, but there are also things going on at the level of the publisher's line, you know, where you're getting pulled into crossovers, or they're having to change things to match what's happening in the movies, because that's what's actually making the money. Are these things that you experience?
All of the above.
Yeah.
There are limitations to what you could do with the character. I was told that I couldn't do anything with S.H.I.E.L.D. or any of the Skrulls or any of that kind of stuff. I had to stay within a certain boundary, and I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk a bit about Killadelphia then. So you've been collaborating on that with Jason Shawn Alexander for several years now. How did you connect with him? How did this idea for a series come about?
Yeah, so Jason, I was hired to do an art book, to interview Jason for an art book. And we found out that we live really close together, so we would go to dinner on a regular basis. And if you are friends with an artist, a comic book artist, and you want to write comic books, you inevitably pitch ideas. And he would pitch ideas to me, and I hated his ideas, and I would pitch ideas to him, and vice versa. He would hate my ideas. And one night when he was drinking whiskey, I pitched him Killadelphia, and he said that he dug it. And I didn't know if it was the whiskey or whether or not he really liked the idea. And the next morning, he said, that vampire thing with the presidents, you know, have you written that down? I was like, no, it's in my head. He said, write it down. I think we could do that one. And he took it to Todd McFarlane at Image, and a couple weeks later, we had a book.
Okay. And so going from sort of pitch to finished book, like how did your, collaborating with him evolve? I mean, this is somebody that you know, as opposed to you're just turning in a script to Marvel and it's being drawn.
It was a lot more intimate, and a lot of the things that I needed to learn as a comics writer, Jason was able to help me fill in some of those gaps in an intimate way.
Yeah.
Like we could have those conversations where with Josh, who was incredible, we were both starting our careers at the same time. So it was different. We were both learning that, whereas Jason has been doing it for 20 years, and he had done a long run on Spawn and different things. So Jason was incredibly helpful just when I would turn in a script, making general suggestions that I didn't see because I didn't have the same level of experience that he did. So he was invaluable.
Can you think of times where your idea for a script or an idea for a plot point might have changed based on his kind of feedback from the artist side?
Yeah, a lot of times when Jason's a great tone getter. Like he would understand what we were going for in a macro sense when I'm trying to execute it straight through. I'm trying to just tell the story. So because he's doing the visuals, he could step back and look at the bigger picture. And he would say, you need some humor here, or you need, you scared me enough. Try this, try that. Where's the heart? That type of thing. And just getting me to look at the scripts more than once or twice and to look at them and be less attached to them. Jason was incredibly helpful with that.
On the some of the most recent arc of Killadelphia, you have some additional artists coming in, some new artists coming in that you're working with and collaborating with. Am I remembering?
Yeah, German. I don't know how to say his last name. It's like that's one when you get the Brazilian guys, they get me with but German is his name, the first name, and he's doing the penciling because Jason is doing Detective Comics and a few other comics, and. But yeah.
Yeah. So that collaboration is just really between them.
Jason,
for the most part?
they do that. Yeah,
okay.
yeah, they do that.
And so, I mean, thinking not just visually, but how the series has evolved from its fairly kind of, street level, right, police story kind of origins to what it's become, because the scope has expanded in a pretty grand kind of way.
We're talking to Jesus now.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So talk to us about how the series goes from A to Z.
In the beginning, I thought it was a really cool idea to be able to use Philadelphia as a backdrop to urban horror. And then it evolved to things that both Jason and I were interested in, religion, and how religion affects society and culture, politics. And then to grow into a more worldly perspective as well. We had to get out of Philadelphia for a minute. We always come back, but we wanted to just explore different types of themes and ideas.
Yeah. And so you've got, situations now where some of the kind of classic image characters are going to be joining the cast and guest starring. And how do you make them make sense within the world that you've created, established?
You go to the DNA of those characters and the DNA of the Killadelphia world, and you just marry them in a way to where you're not allowing one. I think in this arc with Spawn, it doesn't become Killadelphia. It doesn't become a Spawn book. You figure out ways how to marry the best of Spawn with the best of Killadelphia, and just not to allow one to just overwhelm the other.
Yeah.
Savage Dragon is harder because he's a dragon, right. A cop dragon from Chicago is a little harder, but we figured that out.
You got the cop connection.
Yes, that's there you
right,
go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
I should have called you first.
Sure, that's right. I'm available to consult.
Yes.
The Killadelphia, had a spin-off series, right? The Nita Hall's Nightmare blog, which is set in Baltimore. Well, how are Baltimore and Philadelphia different for you when you're setting stories in those cities?
The Philadelphia setting was more of an idea because you have the Liberty Bell, the signing of the Constitution. There's so many things that are iconic with the formation of America. But you also have a lot of the social ills that are connected to the inner city are there in concentrated doses in places. So I wanted to be able to more or less use the idea of America juxtaposed to the reality of aspects of America for Philadelphia. For Baltimore, I'm from Annapolis, so Baltimore was more of a personal idea. You have The Wire and you have other depictions of what Baltimore is. I wanted to try to fit something in the middle that was more surreal to give you a different idea of what it is.
Okay. Well, talking about kind of American history in those spaces, a lot of your work is engaged with, with American history, with Black history. What do these kind of genres do for being able to tell those types of stories? Like, what are the affordances?
I wanted to be able to use history. There's this big controversial thing with critical race theory and talking about history in a very specific way. I wanted to make it personal to where characters were actually going through the history so you could feel it in a way and not just look at it as just points on a map of in 18 whatever this happened and that happened. To me, even if you look at something like slavery, it ended in 1863, there's still the trauma and the psychological aspects of it endure.
Yeah.
So I wanted characters, and vampires are great for that because they're immortal, if they could live with not being able to shake who they were as human beings, they could personalize that experience and I think build a sense of empathy in the reader, hopefully.
Yeah, okay. Well, I have a few more questions, but I also know we only have about 10 more minutes, and I wanted to give our audience a chance to ask questions if there are questions from the audience. Yes, ma'am?
Where do you go for inspiration?
Inspiration. Well, I've got kids and they keep wanting to eat, so that's always a big one. But I think there's but so much time and I have so many stories that I want to tell, so there's this internal drive to want to get them all out of my system. And I hang around a lot of artists. And so when you hang around a lot of artists who are always making things and doing things, it sort of creates this desire to want to be the same type of artist too. So it's more the environment that I create and something that's intrinsic that I just wanted to do. You're welcome.
Yes, sir.
You were talking about the evil CRT meme, and I'm just wondering, is there something that you tried to incorporate in the book so the woke content that maybe you got pushback on in the time?
No, not so much from a woke place. I try to be honest from my perspective and what I've studied in history. It's more of, I try to come from a human place, not so much an identity place. And I think I'm able to connect emotionally. I try to be empathetic, regardless of the race, the culture, or whatever. I try to put myself in that character's shoes and to say, if I was John Adams, and I was a guy who defied the other founding fathers who were with me, how would that feel? I think John Adams in a lot of ways has been forgotten in history. He doesn't stand on the same podium of Thomas Jefferson or George Washington. How would that feel? I try to come more to place myself in their position more so than just say, this is unpopular to say right now, but I'm going to say it anyway, So more from there.
Other questions from out there? Otherwise, I'm going to keep going. Well, since we are here at the Louisiana Book Festival, I wanted to ask you about your Louisiana set work. You have a YA superhero SF series called Quincredible. Can you talk to us a bit about the genesis of that project? And where it's
Yeah, Lion Forge Oni Press came to me and with this character, Quincredible, much like Luke Cage, he's a kid who developed the ability to, he was invulnerable, but he loved superheroes. He wanted a sexier, power. He'd be in, to fly or to just do something that would make him more popular with his friends. And he gets this ability, but the only way he can use it is if he's run over by a car or he's beaten up by bullies, and it's not the coolest thing. But I was able to kind of find a place with him where, as he developed as a young person, he was able to strategically use his ability to help the community. And you think Luke Cage, because he's like indestructible, but he's already Luke Cage. He's already like a guy. But as a kid, finding those places of self-esteem, self-worth, and finding them within community, and community that's sort of struggled, to me was a good use of evolution for that character.
Did that power and that type of profile for that character resonate specifically with New Orleans for you in some way?
Yeah, well, it did, because you see people who have heart and who, regardless of what hits them, they keep coming back. They keep fighting back. And I just wanted to have a character who could find self-worth and see power in self-worth. So that sort of mirrored his ability to be indestructible, mirrored his ability to see value in himself. To me, those two sort of work together.
And there's a third volume of that complete, you said?
It's complete.
Written and drawn, or just written?
Written and drawn. I think 2024 in the spring, they're trying to publish it. So we'll see. Right. And it's in development, too, as a feature. A movie, too. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. All right, that's good to know. Thinking about also some of the licensed work you've done, you've written a James Bond graphic novel?
Yeah, James Bond, Himeros. I think the hardcover just came out a few weeks ago from Dynamite. That was kind of cool. I did Army of Darkness for them as well.
Yeah.
And Alice Cooper, I don't know if that's licensed property, but Alice Cooper as well.
You have to get somebody's permission to use Alice Cooper,
I go to Dynamite to do things that you wouldn't expect a guy like me to do. So
Well, so you're doing James Bond. Do you have a James Bond in mind when you're writing for James Bond? Like
Sean Connery is kind of my James Bond. Roger Moore was fun, but he never looked like physically like he could do some of the things that Sean Connery looked like he would slap you today. He can't anymore, but if he could, he would.
And Army of Darkness has become like a whole sprawling world of its own, from something fairly small. And yours, tell us about your Army of Darkness story.
I tried to combine The Warriors, the movie The Warriors, with Army of Darkness, and Ash comes to New York of that time, the Scorsese New York with the burning trash cans, and fights gangs.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know why. I just love the movie The Warriors. And so if you could do anything, what would you do? And I pitched it, and they said,
That's the only correct opinion about the movie The Warriors, is to love it. Right, we're just being sure. I know people like to say taste is subjective, but when it comes to The Warriors, you can like it or you're dead inside.
It's one of the best movies about gangs that color themselves and different things and run around with no purpose ever made.
That's right, well, so coming to comics from your background in television and film writing, what are the things you have to learn and unlearn from writing a script for Hollywood versus writing a script that someone's going to illustrate?
Moving images do a lot for screenwriting, and being able to tell a story. And I was so married to when the relationship between art and words is different than the relationship with moving images, and I had to learn how to say more with less. And the first time I wrote my first script, the notes I got back from Marvel were, this is ponderous to read. That's not a good word. That's not what you want to hear as a writer. And I didn't understand the difference, the prosier aspect of what I wanted to do versus what they needed me to do. And the world had moved on from those Alan Moore books that I loved so much as a kid. And because there's a lot of words in Swamp Thing and Miracle Man and those. And now it's like, really, how can I say the most with a line or two and still complement the art and move the story along at a consistent pace?
And so, as we said, you began in comics writing, working for Marvel, and you've kind of branched into your own work, and now you are running Zombie Love Studios, where you're on the editorial and publishorial side of it. So can you talk to us about what you envision that being?
Well, I envision taking over the world.
Okay,
now
good.
I just want to take over the office in my house. Making comics is hard. Certainly doing it like I tried to do it, you learn a lot. But I basically just wanted to be able to think of an idea and make a book without going through another publisher, without having to compromise. When you work in TV and film, there's always producers, studios, networks, somebody there to create boundaries. I wanted to have a structureless dynamic where I could just go in and do what I wanted to do. And that was the idea behind it. But then I get Blackula, and I still have to go to MGM, and there are things that I can't do. So, but yeah.
Is the goal then to bring in other people who are writing and drawing their own work under the Zombie
At some
Love
point,
imprint?
yes, but I think it's so directly tied to me that for the first 3-4 books, I have to do those.
Right, yeah.
But then, in best case scenario, I'm able to let it fan out some.
Yeah, and then I think, my understanding that Jason Alexander is kind of art directing for that?
He's
So
art
he'll-
directing, basically finding artists and taking the ideas and putting the best people with the best, the right artists with the right story.
Okay, yeah. Am I getting a warning? The time warning? Oh, wait a minute. Another question from any of y'all before I keep going? Yes.
Yeah, well, you were talking about some of the properties that you worked on. Is there a property out there that's on your wish list that you would like to actually do something?
Kolchak the Night Stalker, from back in the 70s. I actually did a story in the 50th anniversary book, tribute to Kolchak. Kolchak was a character created, I don't know if he was created by Richard Matheson, Dan Rice, I forget the guy that created him, but Richard Matheson wrote 2 movies of the week that I saw as a kid. And when they did movies of the week, and it changed my whole way of looking at horror and the way horror could be sort of disseminated. Darren McGavin played Kolchak, Carl Kolchak, and he had this sense of humor in the way that he went about monster hunting that didn't take away from the horror, and it still made it fun. And so I would love to be able to do something with that character at some point.
What was that name again?
Kolchak, Kolchak. You're welcome. It's where the guy that did the X-Files, Chris Carter.
Just wondering, when you're writing about Killadelphia, what's your research process?
Oh my God. In the beginning, it was extensive. I would read books on each founding father. I went to Philly. I would go back to some of the places where you would see the physical buildings and things. Not as much now because the book isn't as political as it was at one time. But what I would do was, if you read the book, the first half of John Adams' existence would be fact. And then I would create a bridge into fantasy and what his vampire life would be. But it was always attached to the real stuff that was there. But Abigail Adams, his wife, seems to be like the brains of the outfit. But because of the way the world was working at that time in patriarchy, she had to kind of stay in the shadows and really manifest through the sons, John Quincy Adams and that type of thing. So now that she's a vampire and she's immortal and we're in a different time, she can sort of let loose. But I had to go back and study all of those people because I didn't want to do it in a way that was disrespectful and tarnish legacies, and I wanted to deal with history with respect more than anything else, not just with my opinion as to what it should be. So, yeah.
I think we're just about out of time, but I know this month there was an announcement that you're going to be writing a Luke Cage series for Marvel. Do you want to give us a quick elevator pitch?
Yeah, Luke Cage is now the mayor of New York, which he was an inmate when he first started. Now he's the mayor. But he's the mayor of New York, and New York has gone crazy, I guess. There's a big gang war that's taking place, and there's an anti-vigilante act to where that Kingpin, when he was mayor of New York, signed. So there are no superheroes. It's against the law to be a superhero. And when the city is going crazy, all of the superheroes, Spider-Man really starts it. They're all underground trying to still fight crime and not get arrested while doing it. And Luke, at a certain point, being the mayor and the figurehead, he's got to walk that line between being a government official and Luke Cage. So yeah.
Okay, look forward to it. All right, I think we are about out of time. Oh, wait, sorry. Oh, we have. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it said. Oh, my bad. Then in that case, we'll keep going. I'm sorry. I had that wrong. Okay, great. Good deal. Okay, so that's not the end. We're going to come back to Luke Cage in a minute. So talk to us about Monarch a bit. This is a series you just wrapped with the artist Alex Lenz.
Yeah, I love Monarch. Really, it was me sitting and remembering when I was a kid in junior high school, wondering if an alien attack happened at school, what would happen. So it's a little bit of Lord of the Flies. It's a little bit of Independence Day, set in Compton. And what kids would do if all the teachers were gone and all of the structure was gone, how would they survive?
Yeah. And I know the 6th issue of that has come out. Is that the end of the series or the end of the arc?
It's the end of the arc. At some point, I'll bring it back, but between that and all the other books, you know, it's tough to keep ongoing books,
Right,
you know, at the same time. I'm writing like 8 books a month now.
Yeah,
so
that's a lot.
it's
Yeah,
a lot. It's
right.
a lot. It's a lot.
I mean, and is there a comparison? I know sometimes we hear with like streaming television that, you know, there's a good return on the first 2 seasons and then diminishing returns after. Do you see something similar with comics? Maybe you haven't felt that.
I mean,
with
I think
Killadelphia.
you always have to do something that reinvigorates. It used to be a time where you would have Action Comics 1,000 and Detective Comics 400, and people
Right.
just got used to
Yeah.
staying with a book. Here, you have to reinvigorate and remind people. You know, Killadelphia is in its 6th story arc, so you need Spawn, you need different things to kind of shake it up to remind people that it exists. It's harder now because they're not on spinner racks in the grocery stores or in the corner stores anymore. They're you have to go to a comic shop or you have to go to Amazon, and it's more of an effort, and they cost more.
Yeah.
So you have to continuously, you know, give people a reason to read your book.
Yeah. I mean, do you feel like we're at a point where doing the monthly series to subsidize the trade paperbacks is going away? Do you envision going directly to trade paperbacks in the future? Or do we
I
still
would
read
love
the
to
book?
go to trade paperbacks, but it seems like to amortize the cost of doing it in the first place, everybody needs to do a floppy.
Right, yeah.
That's what I've been told at every publisher I've ever worked at. So
Yeah.
that's what it is.
Okay, yeah. And for your independent work that you're mostly doing through Image, I mean, can you talk to us a little bit about what that is like? Because my understanding is, for the most part, Image is mainly a publisher and a distributor, and everything else is on the creators.
That's it. It's like you're in business for yourself. You have, Image provides a service. They do accounting for you. They ship your books. They give some publicity, you know, some marketing. But for the most part, you're on your own. You know, you have to pay your artists. You have to pay everybody who's part of the creative process and the editorial process. So the creative part, you're funding, and the business part, they kind of take care
Yeah.
of.
But Image, it seems like, is maybe one of the only games in town where you, if you're wanting to sell comics in the monthly market, you can actually still own everything.
You still have your intellectual property. That's still yours.
Yeah.
That's the highlight. Everybody else, if you go to at least Boom and a few others, they want 50% of your IP or whatever, but they're still offering the same service. They may pay for an artist, they may pay to put up a little bit more for the book to be done, but at the end of the day, you now have a business partner for the duration of the property.
Right. Yeah. Well, do you, for the properties that you do own through Image, I mean, are you envisioning expanding beyond comics into movies, TV, lunchboxes?
Well, yeah.
Ringtones, you know? Yeah.
Killadelphia has been optioned already, and I just have to write the pilot for that.
That's all.
I think, yeah, that's all. I just got to write. Monarch has been. I'm talking to someone about optioning that now, so it's just a process. I think the writer's strike slowed down business for 5 months.
Yeah.
And I think next year you'll probably hear more about things moving.
Well, I mean, one of the things that I appreciate a lot about your work that you write for comics, your independent work, is that it doesn't seem to fall victim to the mentality that I see sometimes in independent comics, which is, I'm writing a comic so that it can be a TV show.
Yes.
Right? This comic
Yes.
only exists as proof of concept. You
No,
know?
I love the book, and I think the heart of the story and the characters is the book. And I look at that just as its own entity.
Yeah.
If it becomes something else, great. But it's not intended that way. I think structurally, TV and film is where my head started. So you're always going to get that feel.
Yeah.
But that's not what I look at the books as. My heart is in the books for being books.
Yeah. Can you talk to us a bit about writing for the Star Wars universe? Because that is, both similar, but I also assume different than writing for Marvel, right? You've written Lando. I mean, you've done things that are direct adaptations of the show, but then also stories of your own set in that world.
Yeah. It's an honor because, I grew up like most kids, loving the Star Wars universe. But it's also tedious in the sense of you have two groups of editors. You have the Lucasfilm folks who take it very seriously. And you have the Marvel folks who are sort of competing with the Lucasfilm folks to make sure they take it seriously too. So every I has to be dotted, every T is crossed, every ship has to be, the Clone Wars ships can't go into the modern era, post-Skywalker era. It's really, it pushes you in the science fiction fantasy idea. But it's also, like I said, an honor because you're playing, it's all canon. The comic books are canon the same way the TV shows and the movies are. So you can look at Wikipedia, because there's a Wikipedia, and you can see your book alongside A New Hope or the Clone Wars. And it's all like one universe, so it's kind of cool.
Yeah. Do you have more Star Wars things coming in the future?
Yeah, I've done adaptations on Boba Fett. All of the TV stuff I've done adaptations on, and I have The Inquisitors. I'm doing a horror-themed Star Wars book now.
Okay. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Where does your Lando series fit into the sort of mythology? This is...
That was the prequel to the Solo movie.
Okay.
So the Donald Glover version of Lando, not the Billy D.
Yeah.
And so it was him, early pirate, scoundrel days.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, you obviously have a kind of had a high profile in TV before you began writing for comics. But for people who are interested in becoming comics writers or understanding that from the ground up, like what is like key advice for kind of breaking in from that perspective?
Breaking in, comics like TV and film have their own culture. And I did not understand that culture. It's a weird, you really need to make relationships with editors. Editors are the gateway to being able to work. And editors actually gauge your ability to come in on time, your temperament, all of that stuff. That's the guy. It's not so much the head guy, it's the guy that you're working with day to day. And they move around a lot, and they all talk to each other. So the editor is sort of kind of the key. That's what's worked for me.
So going back then to the very beginning of your career, like how did you get your start as a person writing scripts in Hollywood?
Oh boy, that's a longer one. I met Damon Wayans on a movie, Major Payne, and he gave me an opportunity to come to California. And after some ups and downs, I ended up on the show My Wife and Kids, and as a punch-up writer for one day. And I just kept coming back every single day, and they ended up hiring me as a staff writer, and I haven't stopped working really since.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the high-profile projects that you worked on, which is another comics and TV mesh, is the Boondocks. How did you meet Aaron Magruder? How did you connect with him?
We had a mutual friend, and the show was in development. They had tried to sell it at like maybe 9 or 10 different places, and they weren't able to get it set up. And then we were introduced to each other. I was writing on My Wife and Kids, and we hit it off both, I think, our opinions in regards to politics and humor sort of meshed. And so we wrote the pilot for the show at Fox, I believe, and then that didn't go, and then Adult Swim reached out and we wrote The Garden Party. That was the first episode of Boondocks.
Were you already a fan of the strip?
I knew of it. I didn't read it every day just because I didn't read newspapers every day. But I was a fan of it, and I was a fan of the idea of it. It was political, but not heavy-handed. It was sort of like an urban Charlie Brown, like the Peanuts. It had its own thing, and Aaron's a huge fan of the Peanuts. But yeah.
What could y'all, I mean, this is an interesting case because this was a case where the television shows seemed to take some bigger swings or could do things that the strip couldn't.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
What are some things you recall being especially controversial or yeah?
Well, virtually every episode was controversial. Some of the language that we used, some of the themes that we explored. I think it was, there's a type of television when it comes to black TV. If you think about the Richard Pryor Show, In Living Color, the Chappelle Show, there's an angry sort of edge to those shows, and the Boondocks had that.
Yeah.
And to me, a lot of the controversy was really speaking to taboo subjects that television didn't typically, deal with. Black television I grew up with, the Norman Lear television, where you had the white conservative was bad, the white liberal was good, and blacks were kind of martyrs in between, trying to figure out which side they should align themselves with. And that idea, I think, became antiquated as time moved on, but TV was still using that math in how to deal with black storylines. And I think shows like the Boondocks just kind of blew that out of the water from a satirical place.
Yeah.
And there were no boundaries, and I can't believe you guys would say that. That type of thing was what I would hear.
Right. Yeah. It was for somebody with a shelf full of BET awards. It was very hard on BET. I remember.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It was funny. I was banned there for a long time.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I couldn't go there for almost a decade, and we made up. Some people you might not make up with, but. Yeah, we were a little hard on BET.
And many other targets as well.
Yes.
Were you involved? Did you sort of know who the voice actors were when you began writing and wrote kind of to their strengths? I mean, can you recall how certain characters shaped based on how you knew people?
Yeah, I mean, Regina King, the great Regina King, did both Huey and Riley Freeman, and so that always was a treat to be able to see two characters in a room, the same person is voicing those characters. And ideologically, those two characters were so different. But she did a great job because she's a great actress, not just voice actress, but actress. And she was able to give them both life in a very unique way. Gary Anthony Williams and I go around the country and talk about the show sometimes. And he played Uncle Ruckus.
Yes.
Yeah, he was Uncle Ruckus. And all of those people. I think a lot of times we were able to get talent. James Earl Jones came on because they were saying things they were never allowed to say before.
Yeah.
And just that release of being able to be that type of character and to play that type of character was like a treat.
One of the series that you won an award for was the Return of the King episode, which won a Peabody Award. And that, for those of you who don't know, was an episode that set in an alternate reality where Martin Luther King, when he was shot, went into a coma instead of dying, and now he has come back in the contemporary era and found it a bit wanting.
Great way to put it.
Talk to me about the challenges of sort of humanizing Dr. King in a moment when he's been kind of sanctified.
Well, I think we talked about this before, where a lot of times in history, you canonize figures and you take away an aspect of their flaw because you think it desecrates that legacy of that person. And I think to be able to humanize folks like Dr. King, Malcolm X, whoever you're dealing with, it actually, in my opinion, enhances what they accomplished. Because you think, for the regular person, we all have flaws. And in spite of their flaws, they were able to change the world or change perspectives. And I think that's what that episode was trying to do, was to say that Dr. King has opinions that don't always flow in line with, the culture, if the culture isn't behaving in a particularly positive way. And, it was probably the most honest depiction, I think, from our point of view, for sure.
Again, thinking about works that have kind of crossed over with other properties, with other ideas, writing American Gods for Starz based on a Neil Gaiman book. What were some of the challenges of adapting that property?
I think anytime you adapt a book like American Gods, there are the people who love the book as is, and then there are people who sort of understand that the book can't be the TV show and that they're different things. And the TV show had its own sort of life, but it was always haunted by the book, so, yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right, another last question from the audience. Yes, ma'am.
Did you have a favorite episode of
My Wife and Kids, Road Trip, the first one I ever wrote. It was the first script, the first credit I ever got. I think they went to Boston and they had coonskin caps and I think they got arrested. They never made it to Boston. They never made it, but that was my favorite thing. Yeah.
One more? Any other questions? If not, let's give a round of applause for Rodney Barnes.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.